Hello guys, welcome to Photography Club, and this will be your first tutorial. And for this month's theme, we're going to go with composition. Now, some of you might not know what composition is in photography, so I've put together this little tutorial which will hopefully help you get a bit of a better understanding of what we mean when we talk about composition in photography. To give you a bit of a basic overview, composition basically just means what is your photo composed of? In other words, what does your photo have in it, and what things might you deliberately try not to have in it? Why might you not want to have those things in it? How might you want to position certain things in your frame, and what effect might they have in positioning them in certain places? So I've came over to Newton Hill first for our first location. Not the most exciting thing in the world, but just behind me, or behind you, you can see a bench. So let's go and take a look and see how thinking about our composition could potentially make a little bit more interesting photograph of this bench. Okay, so to start off, you might come along and think, right, there's the bench, let's just take a photograph of it and see what we can get. And you might do something like this. Now for me, that photo's a little bit boring, and you might have decided to come at the side and get a photograph of it like this. But again, for me, that is a little bit boring. It doesn't tell much of a story. The light's not great, and nothing really interesting going on with either of these two photographs. However, if we go back to our first position, and I'll put some video up here just so you can see how, if I just start to move around just a little bit, so if I crouch down a little bit and tilt the camera up, you can see how the background suddenly comes into view a lot more, and suddenly we've got a little bit more of an interesting perspective, rather than if I was just standing in my normal position holding the camera facing down the way. Now if I took a few steps backwards and did the same thing, now we're getting something where we've got an image that potentially has a bit more depth to it, where I've got not only the bench, but I've also got the cliffs in the background and the sea. I might want to also try just coming off round to the side, just at a slight angle, and you can see how doing that, I'm only taking a couple of steps here, but suddenly we've then got a bit of the sky in there. If I come a little bit lower down, again, more of the sky. So already we're starting to get a little bit more interest in our photograph. Now, for me, I think what I prefer most is where I get the bench in shot, a little bit of background with the cliffs, and maybe a little bit of the ocean. I did quite like that angle though, so let's just take a look around here, and I'll put up on screen the image and angle I am most happy with. Okay, so this is the image I'm most pleased with and the angle that I settled with. So what I've done here is I've tried to get approximately a third of the image filled up with the sky. The other 2/3 are more obviously the cliffs in the background and the bench in front of us there. And that, positioning it like that, just added a little bit of depth to the image, which for me makes a much more interesting photo. Okay, let's go and take a look at another location. Okay, so next up I've got this field that I'll just show you just now, where we've got a bunch of hay bales, and you might choose just to come in and snap a picture of one of these hay bales, and you might end up with something like this. Now, looking at that, there's a couple of things I don't like. It's not too bad, but it's just a little bit boring. Something I really don't like is the position of the two hay bales in the background that are acting as a little bit of a distraction in this image. And so what I might choose to do in this case is a really simple composition technique where you fill the frame with what you like. And what I like in this example is just the one hay bale, so I might just move a little bit closer and end up with an image that looks maybe more like that. And then for me, I think you just end up with a little bit more powerful an image there. I've filled up the picture with what I like and kept it as simple as possible, just one main subject. And that leads on to another sort of basic rule of composition that's quite quite good advice to follow is don't try and overcomplicate your pictures. Try and keep them as basic or as simple as possible, maybe 1 or 2 subjects. If you're going with 2 subjects, I'll show you what to try to do with them in this next image. So if you're wanting to include 2 subjects in your photo, something you should really consider is the rule of thirds, and that's something that might be a future theme for us in Photography Club. The rule of thirds is where you get a 3x3 grid put over your screen of what you're taking a photo of. I'll try and put an example of the 3x3 grid up over the screen just now. And with this grid, there's the intersecting points where the lines cross over with each other. And those 4 points are basically the points of main interest in a photograph. If you can line up your subjects at diagonally opposite points out of those 4, so either the bottom right and the top left, or the bottom left and the top right, then generally you'll get a much more pleasing image, and your viewer will sort of bounce between the 2 subjects in your photo as a result. Whereas if you don't line them up on those diagonally opposite points, your viewer might be a little bit confused over what they're meant to look at. I'll try and show you an example of that now. I've came down to a park in Stonehaven and plenty of objects around here, so I will get something put together and show you what I've come up with. Okay, I've ended up getting a picture I like. Again, funnily enough, we've got these benches here. There are actually 3 of them, and I've been looking around. Initially I was looking at these 2 to see if I could position these in a way that I was getting one at that bottom left third and the other at the top right. Couldn't quite position it how I like because those shadows I felt were getting a little bit distracting. Here's the image I got of those 2. But I then came around to this position approximately over here, and I like this one much better. I like how I've got the shadow of one bench coming out, and that bench is facing the bench at the bottom right here. And here is the image that I ended up getting from it that I much prefer. Really like the way that the shadow is coming off that bench, and you can maybe see there how the 2 intersecting points, that bottom right and the top left, by positioning the benches there, you can see that your eye maybe bounces back and forth between the 2, and that's the idea behind that part of composition. Certainly a bit more interesting, I think, than that first image. So that sums up our introduction to composition. Hopefully you've learned something from this video and have an idea of thinking about your images that you take for this next month's entry. You're going to have over the holidays for this one as well, so take your time, have a look around, and each time you go to take a photograph, just think things through and think about it before you take that shot. And even after you've taken the shot, maybe have a look at the photo that you've got and see if you're happy with it. If there's any distracting elements, could you maybe reposition yourself and take it again and get a little bit more pleasing an image. Most important point is don't overcomplicate it. Try and stick with something pretty simple. Fill the frame with what you like. If you're going with 2 subjects, try and get them on those intersecting points, whether you're shooting landscape or portrait. Looking forward to see what you can come up with. Till next time.